আসসালামু আলাইকুম। অবশেষে যার ভয় সবাই করতেছিল তা হয়ে ছাড়লো, এবং বেশ কিছুদিন ধরেই কিন্তু আমেরিকা আসলে যে প্রিপারেশন নিতেছিল, এবং লাস্ট এক সপ্তাহ আসলে মনে হইতেছিল যে কিছুটা আসলে ব্যাকস্টেপ করতেছে, বাট সামহাও অনেক ক্লোজ সবাই আসলে বলা বলি করতেছিল যে না, এটা জাস্ট তারা কিছুটা টাইম আরও নিতেছে এবং আরও বেশ কিছু তারা প্রিপারেশন নিতেছিল, এবং অবশেষে ফাইনালি একটা বা দেড়টার দিকে ইরানের তেহরানের প্রায় 30টা ইরানের 30টা ভিন্ন ভিন্ন প্লেসে অ্যাটাক হয়েছে, অ্যাসাসিনেশনের টার্গেট করা হয়েছে, অ্যাসাসিনেশন করার চেষ্টা করা হয়েছে আয়াতুল্লাহ খামেনির উপর। দেন তাদের যে প্রেসিডেন্ট আছে তার উপর, তাদের মিলিটারি পার্সোনালদের উপর অ্যাটাক করা হয়েছে, এবং ইন্টায়ার ইউনিট তুমি বলতে পারো গভর্নমেন্টের সব দিকে আসলে অ্যাটাক করা হয়েছে। এবং ভয়াবহ অ্যাটাক চলতেছে। তো আমরা কিছু প্রথম কথা হইলো কিছু বেসিক ক্লিয়ার করি। সো তোমাদেরকে আসলে আসলে কিছু দেখানোর আছে, দেন আমি আর আসতেছি কথা বলার জন্য। ঠিক আছে,
I said you should not be smiling while saying that, but it is kind of exciting, isn't it?
No, bro. These guys are the bad guys, bro.
Yeah. They're saying maybe even Saudi Arabia. Remember, a lot of these reports are not 100% verified, but Bahrain, we have footage. Abu Dhabi, I'm assuming that there's going to be confirmation of that soon. Kuwait, I don't doubt. Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, I'm suspicious of, so we'll wait to see there.
And now we're seeing
apparently they're hitting Jordan.
On the ground who told me it is Kuwait has been hit. Kuwait has been
So
hit.
Kuwait is confirmed.
Only supported superficially. What if Iran turns the table and launches a decapitation strike? Minister of Defense and the Chief of Staff, etc. So this is a straight up decapitation strike, and that's what seems to be going on. Again, there are some people who speak of, as if they have some inside knowledge. 4 waves of attacks. I don't know, but I do know.
Discussing right now.
Imagine that.
There'll be U.S. bases at the get-go. I don't expect them to strike.
I mean, there's U.S. military facilities in all of these places that you've discussed. So there's get loaded up into the weapons systems, and if they're cruise missiles or anything, you got to have overlay of air defense that you're dodging around, all updated. This takes time, so it's not like it's not a computer game where click, point, they're dead. It takes a while to develop these targets, and if the Iranians were smart, and I tend to believe they are smart, every hour and 15 minutes, because I'm just throwing out a number there. That's the reaction time for targeting. And if they're doing that, we will never, but in the act of communication is in itself problematic, because the Iranians are going to be running around there looking for signals leaving Tehran, and they'll hunt down these people. So my point is this was always a flawed plan. Because if the goal up front is to decapitate the leadership, and the next goal is going to be to suppress the regime's ability to respond, so they're going to be hitting barracks facilities, communications facilities, things to suppress the regime's response. All of this was predictable. It's the same plan we used, for instance, in Desert Fox back in December of 1998 when we struck Iraq. We launched a decapitation strike that killed nobody. And then we launched a security suppression, striking barracks facilities that were empty. The Special Republican Guard had left the barracks and were in their deployed status. The forces that need to protect this regime are not in their barracks right now. They are deployed, they are ready. And if the Mossad gives a signal for people to go up in the streets, those will be the shortest-lived demonstrations that ever took place on the face of the earth. So this plan has failed from the start. We have failed. And let me just say another thing, too. We only have a limited amount of ammunition. This is what the generals were telling Trump. We don't have enough ammunition to do this. We just blew a whole bunch of ammunition striking empty targets. And so now we're going to have to go into the adaptive phase. Now we have to start collecting intelligence. Where did they move? Because a decapitation strike that doesn't decapitate creates problems for your plan. We're going to start to see problems of targeting cascade downwards, because now resources that are supposed to be freed up when you decapitate, now we can take resources and apply them to other target decks, are going to have to be brought back and reinforced to complete the necessary first step of decapitation. This plan has fallen apart from the very beginning, Mario. Understand that. If they're saying the supreme leader is alive, if they're saying the president is alive, then we have failed. And now we're going to double or triple or quadruple the resources trying to hunt them down and finish this job. So and we're going to run out of ammunition. And this is what the generals and admirals were telling the president. You can start this plan. You're going to run out of ammunition, and then you've got nothing. And the Iranians now, we'll see. Because I think, again, my guess is that we're trying to make it as difficult as possible for the Iranians to launch ballistic missiles right now. This is why we brought in wild weasel squadrons and a lot of tactical aircraft. Why do we have 12 A-10s? Probably because they're supporting special operation forces on the ground who are trying to hunt down Iranian missiles. So we may not see the massive launches of Iranian missiles right now because they may be suppressed. We'll see. I don't know. But what's going to happen is eventually we're going to run out of resources.
Yeah, Israel has a similar concern as well. The air defense ammunition as well is relatively limited in Israel. You said this operation will fail. If the goal is regime change, and I would agree with you that it is regime change, how can they achieve it? Is the US going to try to incite protests like we saw a few months ago? Or could we see special ops on the ground in Iran try and help with the overthrow?
Well, first of all, we have to be careful about the role played by special operations forces. They're good, but they're not perfect. No, this we'll go off the game plan that appeared to be in play in late December, early January, where Scott Bessent brags at the World Economic Forum about triggering a economic crisis, collapse of the real, dollar shortage, etc. But that was triggering a crisis in peacetime. I just think people need to understand what happened here. Iran's at war right now, so it really doesn't matter what the exchange rate of the real is because the economy isn't normal. Nothing's normal right now. So, already we have a disjointed plan because the original plan was to have an economic crisis that created legitimate protests in the street. And then the Mossad, and we saw this, the protests began December 28th. On December 30th, the Mossad comes out with their Farsi language social media and says, we are with you on the ground. And after that, all the other Western controlled, opposition entities start coming out, and we see the peaceful demonstrations transition into violent demonstrations, deliberate targeted violence by these cells designed to promote an Iranian reaction from the security forces that would then be captured by these various entities inside Iran and broadcast out to be echoed by an entire chamber of useful idiots who start saying tens of thousands of dead, 20,000 dead, 30,000, all made up. There were about 3,000 dead. Many of them were security forces. A lot of them were killed by the Mossad and other guys just to create violence. But this is what happened. This echo chamber that creates this justification for response that led to President Trump saying help is on the way. But help wasn't on the way. We didn't pull the trigger there because the military said we don't have the resources to accomplish the mission. So we had to hit pause. Then we had to flow in air defense. And then we had to flow in military capability. And now we are supposed to have enough pieces on the ground, but you can't restart what we started back in December and January. We tried. You saw there were universities around the country. You saw demonstrators coming out there, bringing up their monarchist flags and all this kind of stuff. You're not going to get that. So the regime change is supposed to be predicated upon popular uprising. Basically people rising in the streets, suppression of leadership, suppression of security forces that leads to chaos, anarchy, and then the paramilitaries will come in, PJAK, the Kurds, the Baluch, and others. But we took too long. And again, if Scott Ritter knows this, so do the Iranian leadership, and so does the Iranian security forces who are deployed, taking proactive measures. So all the things that had to happen to achieve regime change, economic crisis, popular uprising, suppression, decapitation, other forces coming in, they're all out of whack. It's just not going to work.
And what you're describing as well is no longer just a clean regime change. You're talking about a full-blown civil war if you have all these separatist groups moving in. What about Iran's retaliation? We heard news a few days ago that Iran was buying supersonic anti-ship missiles from China. China sent a lot of drones to Iran as well, suicide drones at scale. I'm not sure how many were delivered. What are Iran's capabilities today compared to the 12-day war?
You can receive weapons, but if you haven't trained on them, if you haven't exercised them, if you haven't put the whole support network in place, it's meaningless. Iran had tremendous capabilities during the 12-day war, but that was a very limited conflict. American targeters have been following this. And as I said, I believe right now the American contribution isn't creating billowing clouds of dust in Tehran, but we are suppressing the Iranian retaliatory capability. I believe as we speak, American aircraft are bombing missile sites to prevent missiles from being launched against aircraft carriers, seizing control of Iranian airspace over missile operating areas so that if the Iranians bring the missiles out, we bomb them and we kill them. This is what we're doing right now. So we'll see about their retaliatory capability. But if anybody thought we were just going to bomb Iran and then sit there and let the Iranians bring all their toys out and fire them at us.
Dentist পরামর্শ নাও Colgate Active Salt.
Its lethality. So we may not see the waves of Iranian missiles that we saw last time. There may be a phase of combat where we get some leakers, but you're going to be looking at a war of attrition between the U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, and the Iranian Missile Command as we maneuver. But the goal here for the Iranians is for us to run out of ammunition, and then they'll start throwing the waves. And so that's what my guess will be, is that we'll see the waves of missiles later in this conflict as we lose our ability to control airspace because we have a finite number of resources. And if Iran can wait this out, and if they can make us expend resources, and again, I already told you, we're behind the power curve because we didn't achieve regime change. And so now we have
ballistic missiles. Sorry to interrupt. Ballistic missiles, as reports that are detected heading towards Israel. So Iran may be retaliating as we speak.
Yeah, how many though?
We just came in now, so I'm not sure how many. I'll play, before we get more information on this response from Iran, I'll get the production team to play a clip from Trump, a quick 30-second clip to get your thoughts on it. And a few statements while they prepare the clip. Trump said, Americans may be lost and we may have casualties. We will destroy the threat from the brutal regime. Go ahead, KK.
States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. And we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to...
I think it's a clip of justification that makes no sense. And I thought, I started having hope yesterday. I think the Omanian foreign minister said yesterday that Iran was willing to give up their nuclear material, send it to the US. Now, I'm not sure whether that was confirmed or not, but that was last night before I went to bed. I'm like, all right, maybe this either would delay the war or we have a way out. And then here we are, hours later, the war has begun. Your thoughts on not much to comment really on what Trump has said. It's very clear that he's trying to justify the war, which doesn't make sense in American interests. What I'm more interested in how Iran will reply, how ready Israel is, and whether they will target US bases from the get-go or they'll target Israel first. What will be a better strategy for Iran?
Well, again, I think I always find it uncomfortable to, be speaking on behalf of Iran because I can't. I'm not going to. I'm not pro-Iranian. I'm a neutral observer. But the Iranians have said that this fight will be existential in nature this time. They said it will be different than the 12-day war. We know that the Iranians were very restrained during the 12-day war, that they could have done much worse to Israel, and they didn't. And again, look at their approach to striking the Al Udeid air base notification, firing older missiles. Only 1 or 2 modern missiles came in, and they just did a symbolic destruction of a multi-million-dollar radar. This time they say it's going to be different, very different, and that they're going to bring real harm to both Israel and the United States. They made it clear from the start that no matter how this war started, Israel will be held to account. And so I think Israel will be one of the primary targets for the Iranians. We may not have to see the mass missiles. Last time, they fired a lot of missiles. That was part of their strategy of depletion of air defense. But what they learned is you got to you can penetrate these with modern missiles. So we may see some of the modern missiles up front. So you don't have to have massive launches because, again, if I'm a military planner, I'm not going to let you do mass launches. I mean, remember, we initiated this campaign, the United States and Israel. That means we get to determine where the priorities are. We're not reacting to them. They're reacting to us. And so having done the assessments of where these missile launches take place from in terms of the massed missiles, we should be having airplanes flying over, helicopters flying over, A-10s roaming the desert, looking for missile launchers. So if they're going to retaliate against Israel, I don't think you're going to be seeing the massive waves of missiles. You're going to be seeing, 1 or 2, 3 or 4, 5 or 6 modern missiles that are designed to penetrate the air defense. But no matter what, if this is indeed an existential conflict, then there's no timeline, right, Mario? Because this is a fight to the death. Now, if I'm a championship boxer, do I try and knock you out in the first round, or recognize this is a 15-round fight? And I might even concede the first 4 rounds to you, let you tire your arms out. But when we come down to round 10, round 11, round 12, and I'm still standing, you're tired, your hands start dropping, then the knockout blow comes. The Iranians have said this is an existential fight. So I think we need to understand they're not going to stop. This is not going to be stopped by Donald Trump picking up the phone saying, hey, let me run a symbolic midnight hammer run and you get to hit us and then the war comes to an end. This ends with the death of Iran or the death of Israel. That's it.
Are U.S. forces ready for swarm tactics by Iran? You can have the sea drones, the air drones targeting the warships. If you have hundreds of these drones heading towards the Lincoln, for example, how are military capabilities, American military capabilities against that? And also, if you look at the ballistic missiles targeting the warships, putting aside Israel and U.S. bases, is that a threat to the U.S.? Could we see a warship get hit and potentially severely damaged?
Well, absolutely. But again, Mario, we started this fight. So the way we start this fight isn't to say we're going to give you every opportunity to launch a mass strike against our ships and put us at harm. We start this fight by saying you ain't going to launch anything. What do you think we're doing right now? We're blowing up all their launch facilities. We're seeking to suppress their ability to launch. We have aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln out there. Do you really think that we're going to give the Iranians the opportunity to fire missiles that are disruptive of launch and recover operations? No. We are blowing the crap out of everything. That's what we're doing. Now, the Iranians should be smart, which means hunker down. Let us expend the ammunition, which the Iranians know, thanks to the statements of the general, we have a limited quantity of. So we're going to sit there and suppress. And then we're going to run out of ammunition. And then they'll start threatening our...
just you can mute it. If you can mute it. They're showing the ballistic missiles here. If you want to show any videos, just make sure it's muted. I'm guessing this is an Iranian ballistic missile heading towards Israel. I'm assuming that's Iran's retaliation. As you said, we will not see the same volume of ballistic missiles as we saw in the previous war, as this is a war of attrition. This is over Iraq right now, not over... so I'm guessing it's over Iraq from the team. Now, back to the Iranian response, Scott. I made a post earlier today. You might disagree with it. I said this will not be World War III. Hezbollah said they will not join, as I said earlier, as long as it's a limited strike by the US. US is making it clear it's not going to be a limited strike. How active do you think proxies will be, and do you think they could become a regional war, and what other countries could it involve?
Well,
and more importantly, what would be the role of Russia and China? Could they be more involved this time around than during the 12-day war?
Well, let's start with Hezbollah. My understanding is before the 50 cruise missiles were fired from Israel against Tehran, that the first strikes were actually a very concentrated series of strikes against Lebanon to suppress Hezbollah, and then they launched this attack. I think Hezbollah will be getting involved. This isn't a limited strike. This is existential, which means Hezbollah understands that if the Iranian regime goes down, they go down. So there's no longer restraint. Hezbollah has never fought Israel unrestrained. Now we're talking about literally a life and death struggle for Hezbollah. So I think you're going to see the gloves come off. I wouldn't be surprised if Hamas did the same thing. It just said, screw it, we're going in, all in. Ansarallah has said the same thing. They will not only resume attacks against Israel, but they are going to seek to strike American targets in the region. Do we have sufficient military force for that? Are we ready to resume operations against Yemen? Does Israel have the ability to divert military resources from this now campaign they're committed to in Israel to Yemen, or is Ansarallah going to have more free reign to target things? But this will be a regional conflict. And then the Iranians have always threatened that they have the ability to do X, Y, and Z. Are they going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz? Because if this is an existential struggle, it should be shut down right now. Are they going to strike Saudi airfields? Saudi airfields are being used right now to support this war. Will they strike Saudi oil fields? Because that'd be the first thing I'd do. I mean, just to be honest, I wouldn't say I'd send some missiles to Israel, but I'd start taking out Saudi oil fields. And I'd start taking out Azerbaijani oil fields. I'd start taking out all the oil fields in the region up front. Because the only way you're going to get the United States to pull back is when our economy collapses.
Yeah.
And, that will be the eventual outcome here. But because we're not going to achieve what we wanted. We didn't get the big boys. They're alive, which means the Iranians are falling back on pre-planned pre-planned actions. This will be a long, drawn-out fight for them. This war won't end with Iran saying we surrender. This war either ends with, Kurdish and Baluch pickup trucks running through the streets of Tehran, firing guns in the air as they take over the regime, or this ends with the destruction of Israel.
So you're 100%. So in your mind, this is definitely a regime change operation. It is not pressure to get Iran to hold on negotiation.
It's not in my mind. Israel has come out and said it. They've issued a communique.
Scott, Trump just said it for you just now. President Trump calls on Iranians to rise up and overthrow the regime. That just came in now from the team to overthrow the government. So we are going through a regime change operation, which I don't think even people that hate the regime, me included, don't understand how damaging this will be, not only for Iran, but for the entire region. That's why Gulf nations didn't want to see this war. That's why other U.S. allies didn't want to see this war. And you talked about an escalation ladder. Now, we know one military strategist was talking about how the U.S. will continue escalating until Iran folds on the negotiating table. But if we're talking about a regime change operation, this won't be applicable. If this does become existential, we have an escalation ladder on the Iranian side. And he talked about striking Saudi and Azerbaijani oil fields and closing the Strait of Hormuz. That would be probably the most damaging thing Iran could do to the American economy. Strategy on the Iranian side, is it just slowing it as much as possible? And what would it take for them to start escalating? Is it being able to strike the supreme leader? And also, if they do strike the supreme leader, if they do get him, what happens to Iranian leadership? Could they continue functioning without the supreme leader and the president? And this is strikes in Israel, by the way. These are strikes in Israel, by the way, now, Scott. They started landing. The team just sent me a message now.
Yeah. Welcome to war. I don't really give a damn. We're going to see a lot more of this. This is going to become commonplace, and You kick the hornet's nest, you're going to get stung. We know that they tried to kill the supreme leader because his residence has been destroyed. It was one of the first struck. We know they tried to kill the Iranian president because his presidential palace has been destroyed.
And the defense minister.
Defense minister has been tried to be. They may have gotten him. We don't know.
Sure.
There's reports. I mean, we remember the 12-day war. They killed everybody until it turned out they really didn't kill everybody. A lot of them were alive. But the Iranian supreme leader has said, "I'm a dead man. I accept this. And when you kill me, we will get a new supreme leader." See, people don't understand that this Iranian regime is a constitutional government. It's not a simplistic dictatorship the way it's sold in the West. It's a very complex, democratically based government. The Assembly of Experts is one of these panels in Iran that's responsible for monitoring the work of the supreme leader. People think he's a supreme leader. He can do anything he wants. That's not true. He's the supreme leader who has to carry out his actions in accordance with the Constitution and in accordance with Islamic jurisprudence. And if the supreme leader ever loses the ability to function in that regard, he can be removed by the Assembly of Experts, which is democratically elected by the Iranian people, by the way. But they're also responsible for having a list of people to replace the supreme leader instantly. So they know if the supreme leader is killed or incapacitated, they know automatically who they're going to pick, and it goes on and on and on. So there will be no decapitation until the regime falls. There's no such thing as decapitating and watching it run around like a chicken with the heads cut off. The same thing with the president. Iran has a constitution. Now, I know many people in the West don't want to respect that, and they denigrate the Iranian people. They don't call it it's the most functionally effective democracy in the Middle East, other than maybe Israel. It's a genuine democracy. Pardon?
Lebanon as well. You put that as a pretty good democracy.
I don't know. Lebanon's got some issues. You can't be a real democracy if your government is already dictated how many percentage is going to be Christian, Sunni, and Shia. So you've already imprinted some sort of controls over it. But the Iranians are a functioning democracy, and the West, we need to understand, because what that means is that this country that's been around for 47 years, as the president has said, it functions based upon the rule of law. It functions based upon, it's not on the whim of individuals. It's a system that has been around for a long time. And this system.
আপনার নারকেল তেল কি যথেষ্ট শক্তিশালী? ব্যবহার করুন মায়া হার্বাল কোকোনাট অয়েল।
Central proportions since Dick Cheney first threatened it back in 2005. That's when the Iranians woke up and said, we need to divide our country into 12 autonomous military districts, each one capable of sustaining the fight on its own in case they lose contact with Tehran. Well, that's what we have today. So there will be no regime change. This was predictable. I mean, anybody who knows anything about Iran knows that this was the case. So you can't change the regime.
Then how's this going to end? If they
ওকে, সোফার যতগুলো বেসে অ্যাটাক করছে, এর ভিতরে আরবের প্রত্যেকটা দেশের বেস আসলে হিট করছে একদম ইমিডিয়েটলি। আমি যখন হাতে মোবাইল ধরা আমার, সৌদি রিয়াদে তোমার সাইরেন বাজতেছে, মোস্ট প্রবলি সৌদির কোনো এক বেস হিট করতে পারছে। কাতারে করছে, কুয়েতে করছে, বাহরাইনে করছে, এবং এই স্কট রিটেলের যে ভিডিও আসলে তুমি দেখতেছো, এখানেও কিন্তু আমি বেশ কিছু তোমার ফুটেজ তারা আসলে শো করছে, যদিও আমি অনেকগুলো আসলে সিলেক্ট করতেছিলাম, বাট তারাই আসলে দেখাইতেছে। এখানে ইসরায়েলে হাইফাতে একটা অ্যাটাক করছে, এবং মোস্ট প্রবলি তেল আবিবেও সাইরেন বাজছে। সো কাতারে বেশ কিছু প্লেসে তোমার অ্যাটাক হয়েছে ইমিডিয়েটলি, মাত্র 4-5 মিনিট হইল। সোফার আসলে যেদিকে যাইতেছিল, যেদিকে যাওয়ার ছিল, মোস্ট ইম্পর্টেন্টলি সবাই জানতো যে ফলাফলটা আসলে এভাবে আসলে ধ্বংসের দিকে আসলে যাবে পুরা মিডল ইস্ট, এবং আরবের রাষ্ট্রগুলো যদি চেষ্টা করেও থাকে, মোস্ট প্রবাবলি এবার তারা সফল হইতে পারে নাই। সো এটা খুবই খুবই দুঃখের একটা বিষয় এবং আমাদের মুসলিম রাষ্ট্রগুলো, এবং দেখো পাকিস্তানের যে এলিমেন্ট আসলে এখন সামনে আসতেছে এটাও অনেক শরমজনক। একদম ইমিডিয়েটলি তুমি দেখো 26 তারিখ রাতের বেলা পাকিস্তান অ্যাটাক করে কাবুলে, যেটা তুমি জানো যে একদম কর্নারে ইরানের যুদ্ধটা আছে, মিডল ইস্টে আমেরিকার তাদের লাইফ টাইমে মোস্ট প্রবাবলি তাদের 30-40 বছরের সবচাইতে বড় ওয়ার প্রিপারেশন তারা নিচ্ছে, এবং তাদের এমিউনিশন যেই পরিমাণ আসলে তাদের ইকুইপমেন্ট মিডল ইস্টে আনছে, তুমি এই মুহূর্তে অ্যাটলিস্ট আফগানিস্তানের সাথে আসলে তুমি কোনো সমস্যা জড়াইতে পারো না। সো ওই জিনিসটা অনেক বেশি আসলে সাজানো লাগতেছে এখন। স্টিল আমি এখনও কিছুটা তোমার পাকিস্তানি আর্মি বা আফগানিস্তান দুটো দিকে দিয়ে আমি চাই যে না, এই জিনিসটা আসলে অর্গানিক ওয়েতে হয়েছে। আসলে পাকিস্তানও ফেড আপ হয়ে গেছিলো আফগানিস্তানের বিহেভিয়ার দেখা। সো এই হলো আসলে সোফার আপডেট, এবং কন্টিনিউ করি। এখানে আসলে তারা অনেক কিছু আসলে আপডেট দিতে থাকে। সো ইয়া,
There's not going to be a regime change, and that's the goal of the US and Israel. What's the end result?
Well, from the Iranian perspective, the end result will be that Tel Aviv will look like Gaza.
By the way, just talk about regime change. Netanyahu said the same thing. Our joint action will create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. Now, I said from the beginning, it's if this is a strategy to pressure Iran to fold on the negotiating table, to concede, then it may succeed. If this is a regime change operation, this is likely going to end up in a complete bloodbath. And based on what we're seeing right now, it's looking like a regime change.
Let's look at this. All the demonstrations that took place in December paled in size to the pro-government demonstrations. That's always been the case. They've never had an opposition demonstration get out in the streets and everybody go, "Oh my God, that's the biggest thing we've ever seen." There is a significant number of people who are opposed to the regime, but the vast majority of the Iranian people, support the Iranian regime. And that's why this call for the people of Iran.
সো টুইটারে একটা ছোট পোস্ট দেখলাম, আমার কাছে অসম্ভব লেভেলের ভালো লাগছে, ওই সেন্সে যে এখানে আসলে রিয়ালিটি চেক তোমার দেওয়া আছে। কোডটা আমি পরে আমি ব্যাখ্যা করতেছি। দ্য আরবস অ্যালাউড Israel to butcher Palestinians, hoping that the humiliation will limit itself to just Palestine. The war with Iran will drag them into a deeper crisis. Lesson: if you don't want a bloody nose, then don't act like a coward. So, আরও যতগুলো স্টেট এই ওয়ারের সাথে যুক্ত আছে, এবং তারা আছে ডেফিনেটলি তাদের মিলিটারি বেস ব্যবহার করতে পারতেছে। সৌদি যেখানে আসলে প্রথমে মনে হইতেছিল এই যুদ্ধ থেকে আসলে বের হয়ে থাকতে পারবে, বাট সামহাও তারাও ড্র্যাগিং হয়েছে এবং তারাও এই যুদ্ধের ভিতরে এখন পার্টিসিপেট করতেছে। সো যদি তুমি মনে করে থাকো, যেটা আসলে অনেক অ্যানালিস্টরা বলছে এবং তারা জানে, তারা হইতেই পারে না যদি আসলে তারা এই জিনিসটা আসলে আগে থেকেই বুঝে নেয় যে ফিলিস্তিনের যে ইস্যু আসলে আমরা ফিলিস্তিনের সাথে করছি, এটা শুধু ফিলিস্তিন পর্যন্ত সীমাবদ্ধ থাকবে না। কারণ অ্যাট দ্য এন্ড অফ দ্য ডে ইসরায়েল ওইভাবেই বিহেভ করবে যে যেভাবে দেশ সবসময় করে আসতেছে। আমরা আসলে কেন বারবার আশা করি যে ইসরায়েলের বিহেভ আমাদের মতো হবে, যে মানে তুমি দেখতে পারতেছো যে ইস্যু ইসরায়েলের না, ইসরায়েলের প্লেসে একদম 100% রাইট। সে যুদ্ধ চাইতেছে, যুদ্ধ করতেছে, যুদ্ধ জিততেছে, এবং অ্যাট দ্য এন্ড অফ দ্য ডে সে তার ওই যে এক্সপেনশনিজমের যে আইডিয়া আসলে সে প্রিজার্ভ করে পালে, সে কিন্তু তা করতেছে এবং করতে পারতেছে। সো আমরা আশা করা যে বারবার ইসরায়েল বাড়তেছে, তার মানুষের রিসোর্স বাড়তেছে, এবং অ্যাট দ্য এন্ড অফ দ্য তাদের যেই পলিসিস, ওই পলিসিসে তারা উইন করতেছে, তাহলে তাদের ব্যাক করার কোনো মানে প্রশ্ন আসে। অন্যদিকে আরব রাষ্ট্রগুলা বারবার এই কাজটা করে আসতেছে। সো ইয়া, কন্টিনিউ করি। আর কিছু
Iran to rise up is stupidity personified. It means the people making that call have fallen victim to their own propaganda. We're going to find out just how much the people of Iran are willing to sacrifice to defend the Islamic Republic of Iran. There is zero, zilch, no support in Iran for the return of the monarchy. So this wet dream of having, Reza Pahlavi come back in and take his father's position. No. And all these minority groups, the Kurds, the Lar, the Azeri, they don't have the ability to launch a decapitation strike on their own. This is a fantasy that's premised on the people rising up, the leadership being decapitated, security forces being suppressed, and the people taking control. You hear it. That's what their words are. It's not going to happen.
Even if it happens, I don't think people understand that. Let's say it does happen, they achieve their objective. It's not as simple. There is no strong opposition leader. I don't think the regime is that popular in Iran. You said it's very popular. It's hard to really confirm 100%. But even if it's not popular, let's say it's not popular, there is no leading opposition figure that can take charge. So if the regime does fall, you've just got a country with all these different the US base in Bahrain. So could we see already retaliation against US bases?
That would be the end of the Fifth Fleet headquarters. So yay, Mahark. I mean, look, Mario, this is going to happen all day long as, we're going to start to see the Iranians retaliate. And as I said, we're in a campaign mode now. This is not going to be a 3 to 5 day war. Right now people are talking about 4 days of intensive strike. And then what? Iran is 4 times bigger than Iraq. And we launched, I participated in a major conflict that had a strategic air campaign component against Iraq back in 1991. I also then went back into Iraq for 7 years as a weapons inspector. And the first couple years was basically doing battle damage assessment, visiting destroyed facilities, seeing what we had accomplished. I'm here to tell you right now, you don't accomplish as much as you think. One thing I was told by a senior Iraqi official is, you guys are really good at blowing up empty buildings, and we're really good at pouring concrete. But you didn't get the critical material, the critical machine tools, etc. Iran's been preparing for this attack. Their leadership has been taken to alternative sites. When I visited Iran back in 2005, I had a Revolutionary Guard minder. We were having conversations, and he said, why don't you go to this square in Tehran at this time and then just come back and tell me what you saw? And I went and I looked, I came back and I saw some North Koreans. He said, why do you think they're here? He said, who do you think dug the tunnels for Hezbollah in Lebanon? The same people that dug the tunnels in the mountains north of Seoul, Korea, where all the North Korean artillery pieces are sequestered. And they've been digging nonstop since 2005. Mashhad has an underground city where the government can relocate. Outside of Tehran, underground. They've been going underground. The Iranians are underground right now. We don't have the capacity to beat these people. If you're going to do a decapitation strike, you don't spend an entire month talking about how you're going to do a decapitation. We pulled the trigger in January, but we stopped January 17th. And what day is it today? February 28th. So we've given them well over a month, almost a month and a half, for the Iranians to go into war mode. And I just don't think people respect the Iranians enough and understand what they've been preparing for. This decapitation strike didn't decapitate. And again, I just want to reemphasize this point because people who don't know war shouldn't be engaged in discussions of war. This war is predicated. You have sequences of things that are supposed to happen. And as they happen, you have resources. We have a finite amount of resources. So we have squadrons that have certain capabilities. We have, submarines with certain capabilities. And we take these capabilities and we apply them to a target set. And then as we suppress that target set, we can reallocate these resources onto the next phase. But what happens is if you fail to achieve the results you want, those resources don't get reallocated, they get reinforced. And so we start taking resources that should be doing this over here, and we have to pull them away. This happened during Desert Storm. When we thought we were going to interdict Iraqi Scud missiles in the West, we put a whole bunch of F-15 squadrons up front on that problem set, and we failed. And the Iraqis kept launching against Israel. So now those F-15s, which were supposed to be moved at and carrying out critical strikes there, had to remain and get reinforced. And we diverted resources from the rest of the conflict to move on a new war that was developing. This is what's happening right now. I'm just telling you, I can tell you what's happening in CENTCOM right now. Guys are calling up going, we didn't achieve phase 1 results. And they're going, well, we got to reinforce. Where are we going to get those? Well, we're going to have to degrade our planned attack on this and have to bring those resources here. And now the intelligence, because this is all. Are we back?
Yeah, we're back. We are, while you dropped, we are getting reports. As you said, the Houthis will join. Well, we have reports now of al-Nusra sending missiles from Yemen, obviously towards Israel. We also have reports from multiple sources that there's a hit in Tel Aviv. You talked about this, made comparisons to the war in Iraq. What weapons do you think the Iran will use? Because we've had reports before this war started that Iran was buying a lot of attack helicopters from Russia. Not sure if you've seen this. Not sure what the purpose of these would be. And is there any other new weaponry that Iran would have purchased from China and Russia that they didn't have back in the 12-day war? So what would be different now from the 12-day war that we saw? And also if you can make more comparisons to what we saw in Iraq, so people that were following that war could see the similarities here.
Well, we talk about these helicopters. What would the helicopters be useful for? Not to attack Israel, to attack outside of Iran's borders. We'll just rely on history. During the Gulf War, the United States, deployed special operations forces into Western Iraq together with the British. These are from what we colloquially call Delta Force. And there was a battle that took place around February 14th, St. Valentine's Day, where a half squadron reinforced troop was dug in, and the Iraqis started coming after them with helicopters. And the helicopters were online. They were moving forward, deploying troops, moving forward. And this was very problematic for the Delta guys being boxed in. And so they have to start maneuvering out of this. And then F-15s came in, and there's a famous case where the guy dropped a 2,000-pound bomb, and it hit one of the Iraqi helicopters and blew it up. And then that broke the Iraqi helicopter assault, and they had to disperse and run for their lives, and the Delta guys were able to escape. Literally, I think that's what these new helicopters for. If you're planning, if I'm the Iraqi or the Iranians, and I'm saying, how are they going to suppress my missiles? Because you have to think like that. You have to say, what is the enemy going to do? You have to assume there's going to be special operations forces operating on the ground inside Iran. So you want the most capable helicopters out there hunting these forces down. And I think that's what these advanced Russian helicopters are designed to do, to work with.
So they've already prepped for ground forces, at least special ops being on the ground in Iran. So that's what Iran was prepping for.
I believe so. It'd be stupid not to. Be very stupid not to. So we may not, see the effectiveness of this. Again, if you study the history of American Delta Force operation in Western Iraq, with all due respect to the Delta guys, every time you inserted, you were running for your lives because you were detected the moment you sat down, and you're running. You were never able to carry out the campaign you wanted to carry out. The same thing with the British. The SAS went in there, and within a week and a half, they basically had lost contact with the bulk of the SAS troops deployed. And were feared that most of them were dead or captured. Turns out that they were just running. And we had the element of surprise. If we put special operations forces on the ground, I think they're going to spend far more time running than they are going to be hunting. But that's just what history suggests. And the Iranians should have been preparing for this up front. So we're seeing now. Go ahead.
I was going to ask about the Iran was talking about targeting aircraft carriers. Do you think they could even sink an aircraft carrier, or that's wishful thinking? How strong are the defenses of these aircraft carriers? Now, my thoughts would be wishful thinking. The US would not put the aircraft carriers in a position where they could be sunk. But if I'm wrong, let me know.
Well, I mean, obviously we don't want to put a carrier in a position where it's sunk. But Mario, let me just remind you that I forget the name of the carrier, but there was a carrier operating in the operations against in the Red Sea against Yemen that had to carry out an emergency evasive maneuver so extreme that it threw an F-18 off board. You remember that? Remember that? An American aircraft carrier was in the process of carrying out launch and recovery operations, and because of a Yemeni attack, had to carry out.
The Houthis were able to achieve this. The Houthis were able to
it was
achieve
the
this.
Houthi. And the aircraft evasive maneuver that was so extreme that it threw an F-18 off the deck of the ship. So clearly, our aircraft carriers can be put at risk. If you hit an aircraft carrier, you can sink an aircraft carrier, depending on what you hit. Now, I saw you put a post up there about about CIFS, close-in fire suppression system. Mario, it's been around forever. It doesn't work. All right, it's never been fully tested, but it doesn't work against hypersonics. And so, if the Iranians were able to get hypersonic maneuvering warhead in the vicinity of an aircraft carrier, it will hit the aircraft carrier. So this is why we put such an emphasis on suppression up front. What we need to do is deny the Iranians the ability to salvo launch these missiles. If you run a leaker at the United States, we're going to shoot it down. There's no doubt about that. So no matter how advanced, you can get that most advanced Chinese weapon you want. You fire one, we're going to shoot it down. We have overlaying air defense capabilities. We're going to get it. What you need to do is you have to fire an opening salvo that's designed to overwhelm our air defense capability. You start getting the radars to lock in. There's only so many targets they can track at once, start to communicate, start deciding which munitions to fire, position themselves. And so now you start getting that chaotic factor in there. Shifting targets. Now you get confusion in the system. And then you come in with your knockout punch, hypersonic maneuvering, and we won't be able to adjust to it, and they'll hit ships. But this requires the Iranians to be able to carry out this kind of sequenced attack. And our job, the air wing commander's job, is to disrupt that. We're not going to let them be able to carry out these sequenced attacks. The problem is we're going to run out of ammunition. That's the problem. That's the fatal flaw in this entire plan, because there will come a point where the aircraft we start sending over won't have bombs to drop. And when that happens, the Iranians come out of the hunker down position they're in, and they begin the sequenced attacks. And that's where we run. I don't think we're going to lose a carrier up front. But when this war drags on and on and on, and we start running out of ammunition, say in about a week and a half, that's where the window of vulnerability comes in. And, that's what I believe the generals were telling the president, that we can, if we have unlimited ammunition, we can win this war. Because we have superior.
We were talking about American ammunition being depleted a year ago now, Scott, with the Ukraine war and all the support there. And now we're talking about a new massive war with Iran. While you're speaking as well, the Houthis announced they will begin attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Is there certain, I know it sounds like a silly question now, but is there certain red lines? In every war, there's like, if you do this, we do that. So is there anything specific that if the US crosses that line, we might see Iran strike Gulf nations, Dubai, the UAE, Saudi, oil fields, beyond military bases, beyond US military bases? So I feel like there's an escalation ladder on the Iranian side where we strike Israel. The Houthis attack ships in the Red Sea. Then we start striking US bases. Then we might start striking Gulf interests in the region, including oil fields. And then the last, line that Iran could cross, the biggest escalation that they could achieve is trying to close the Strait of Hormuz, which would cripple their economy, but also cripple the global economy. So is there a certain tit for tat that we could see in this war?
Again, I just have to go with what the Iranians said, that this isn't going to be a, sequential escalation. This is an existential fight. It began now. All the statements coming from the Ministry of Defense is, it's on. The game is on. And so therefore now the Iranians will operate on their timetable. They have a plan. That's what no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. Our plan has already failed. We didn't achieve regime change. So now, and then the other thing
because the decapitation strike did not achieve, it did not eliminate the targets that were targeted. We didn't see the 12-day war was a lot faster. We would get names within the first few hours. We're getting names of people that were hit, and most of them were killed. In this case, Iran seems to be a lot more prepared. So the decapitation strike did not succeed like we saw in the 12-day war, and that will slow whatever plan the US and Israel have.
Well, because if again, I'm just reading into the president's statements and the statements by the Mossad that have come out. Regime change is predicated upon the ability of the Iranian people to rise up and remove the regime from power. One of the ways that we wanted to facilitate that is to eliminate the authority of the regime by killing the leadership and then suppressing the security forces that would respond. Do we see in Tehran right now, are you seeing 1 million people out in the streets waving the banner of the monarchy saying Khomeini must die, Khomeini must go? Nope.
Yeah. Could we see a rally around the flag? Could we see the complete opposite? Remember the 12-day war? Everyone thought we'd see a regime change, then people on the streets. And even people that did not like the regime rallied behind the regime against the
100%.
So we could see the opposite of what we saw in January.
We're going to see the entire Iranian nation rally behind the nation of Iran, which is defined by the Islamic Republic. This regime change fantasy has failed and will fail. And so now the Iranians are going to wage the war they need to wage. They didn't start this. I just want people to understand that too. They didn't start this. They were working actively to find, as you said, they were putting solutions on the table that would have resolved this nuclear issue altogether. But this was never about the nuclear program. This was never about anything other than regime change. And so now that Israel and the United States have thrown away any pretense and have committed to a regime change operation, this is an existential war of survival for Iran. So there's no reason for them to do anything other than defeat the entities that are arrayed against them. The United States will be the easiest one to defeat, just so people understand it, because we don't, the Iranians don't have to defeat the United States militarily, just politically. And this is the president just committed political suicide. It's over.
Exactly.
47. Yeah. It's over. Finished. Goodbye. Des vidania. Adios. Whatever.
The longer this lasts, and the more U.S. casualties, that's how Iran would win. Trying to get,
but not even with U.S. casualties. A failure to accomplish the task. We could have this war go on and not lose a single soldier and still lose, because this is a regime change operation. And when it's exposed that we can't change the regime, that we have failed. I mean, Pete Hegseth and his muscle, go bench press another 315 pounds, Pete. That isn't going to help you target Iran more effectively. This is a failure of the Americans so far. Who knows? I mean, we may wake up and find out that they actually killed everybody. Then we change the thing. But right now, it doesn't appear that they have. Plus, the Iranians have a plan. The United States loses by not winning. The question now is, what about Israel? Because Iran has rightly said that Israel is the root of all evil here. And so Israel has to be punished from the Iranian perspective. So I don't think this is going to be about escalation here, escalation there, escalation here. I think the Iranians are going to have a campaign plan that is going to lead to the physical destruction of Israel. That's their objective. And now that Israel has initiated this fight, there's nothing to stop the Iranians. This isn't going to be, we're going to cross one red line at a time. The red line has been crossed. Israel crossed the red line. So now Iran is in its existential war of survival, which requires them to outlast the United States, leading to the political collapse, the collapse of will. This president's going to be running. We're going to find out what kind of man Donald Trump is. And Mario, did you hear his voice? Did you hear confidence in that voice, or did you hear a scared, fat old man? I heard a scared, fat old man. He wasn't confident. He's just blabbering nonsense. But what happens now in a week or so, he's going to start blaming the military. He's going to blame Joe Biden. Joe Biden broke our military, and we're still paying the consequences of Biden's mismanagement. And he's going to be looking for a way to get out of this war. Iran. You asked before what the role of China and Russia will be. Mm. China and Russia have different objectives than Iran. China and Russia are not looking for the physical destruction of Israel. What China and Russia are looking for is political and economic stability. And key to this is the survival of Iran as the Islamic Republic. So China and Russia are going to be playing very big diplomatic games. Their job is to get the United States to end this war, and their job is to get to Iran to agree to terms of conflict resolution. And so you're going to be seeing them do that. All the people that think that Russia and China are going to jump in with 2 feet to start fighting for the Iranians, that just isn't going to happen. What Russia and China are
আপনি কি আপনার সন্তানকে নিজ হাতে বিষ কিনে খাওয়াচ্ছেন? না, তাহলে কম দামে কেনা খাবার নিয়ে একটু
What they're looking for is the sustainment of a multipolar world predicated on BRICS, and Iran is part of the BRICS. If the United States and Israel are successful in removing the regime, they are successful in removing a nation that is critical to the success of BRICS, Iran. And as I've said in other podcasts, people made fun of me. I don't care because I'm confident in my assessment. If Iran falls, Brazil will be next. Saudi Arabia, South America will be next. South Africa, and instead of BRICS, you have RIC, Russia, India, and China. But India is already a flaky player, and BRICS is over. And this is Donald Trump's plan. Remember, Donald Trump has been declaring war against BRICS for a long time. So this conflict is being waged on a completely different plane when it comes to Russia and China. They're not into the, how many missiles are striking this, missiles are striking that, missiles. They're into how can we bring this conflict down without disrupting the plan of action that they have embarked on in terms of imposing or overlaying a multipolar system over the world, a competition to the West. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot of diplomatic play. They also they're going to be telling the Iranians, don't do the escalation. I mean, the only thing that might save the Saudi Arabian oil fields is a Russian phone call that says, don't do that. Limit this to, military exchange, political exchanges, but do not play the economic death card because the economic death card impacts Russia and China as well. And,
but Russia wouldn't Russia benefit though from an increase in oil prices and a weakening US taking attention away from Ukraine? So I think Russia would be one of the biggest winners in this war. And the longer it goes on, the better it is for them. How important is Iran for them strategically versus weakening the US? Which one's more important to them?
Well, they don't care about weakening the US. Russia's not in the business of weakening the U.S. Has never been in the business of weakening the U.S. That's a fabricated fantasy of neocons in the United States.
But even now with the Ukraine war, though, or maybe not before the Ukraine war, but with the Ukraine war,
they're not in the business of weakening the United States. That's not their strategy. The Ukraine war is about protecting the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine. End of story. Never been about the European fantasy of Russian expansion, imperial Russia. It's been about protecting the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine from the predations of the Western Ukrainian neo-Nazi nationalists. That's all the war is about. We turned it into something else. But Russia would be willing to turn that switch off at any time if they achieve their objectives of protecting the Russian-speaking population. This isn't about a war between Russia and the United States, weakening the United States. We made it a war about weakening Russia. Russia didn't make it a war about weakening us.
But it is where we are right now is that the main hurdle to a peace deal is the territory. And for
that's not true.
To be able to,
that's just not true. The main hurdle to a ceasefire is territory. Russia has never once deviated from its core objectives. This is about NATO. There cannot be NATO in Ukraine at all. There can't be European forces in Ukraine at all. And now we have another thing. People tend to forget that Russia said we will never allow NATO-aligned long-range strike missiles to be based on Ukrainian soil that can strike inside Russia. And yet now we have a British-made Flamingo missile being launched against Vodkinsk and other strategic plants. So this becomes more complicated. This is so much more that the territory issue was just about creating the conditions for a ceasefire after which the conflict termination things could be dissolved. But Russia has never deviated from its core requirement of an absolutely neutral, non-aligned Ukraine. That's what this war is all about.
The NSA base, as we're speaking in Bahrain, just got struck, according to a few sources, by at least one Iranian ballistic missile.
Imagine that, but where's the THAAD? Where's the THAAD? Where's the Arrow 3? Where's the Arrow 4? Where's David's sling? Where's all that? What we're seeing right now is this is what I told you. The leakers, the Iranians don't need massed attacks. They have missiles right now that individually can defeat everything we've put up there. There is no missile defense shield over Israel right now. There is no functioning missile defense shield over Israel. It's designed to guard against a mass attack of old drones and old missiles. But the Iranians didn't deploy them during the 12-day war. They have a large stockpile of very advanced missiles, which they began to unveil at the end of the 12-day war. This is what brought Netanyahu to his knees, because Netanyahu woke up one morning and went, they just hit 3 of our most top secret sensitive facilities. How the hell did they know about these to begin with? And then they hit them with deadly accuracy. We can't stop them. We have to have this war end now. So Iran is opening with the way they finished the 12-day war. A handful of missiles, strategically important targets.
The team will show footage now from Bahrain, but while they're showing that footage, I want to go back to the point of weakening the US, because I think it's not only Iran that dictates what happens next. I'm not sure if you agree, but China and Russia play a key role as the main funders and supporters of militarily and economically to Iran. And I just don't understand how Russia does not benefit today, where things stand today, from a weaker US. A weaker US not able to support Ukraine does not allow Ukraine to continue the war. And in terms of the territory not being a sticking issue, Ukrainians said it is a sticking issue. Russia said it is non-negotiable. And they've, all parties I'm not saying it's the only issue, but all parties on the negotiating table said this is non-negotiable. Ukraine does not want to give up the Donbass. Russia said the Donbass is already ours. We will not stop until the Donbass becomes part of Russia. And if Ukraine cannot sustain this war with American support, they cannot sustain it with American support. And if America is too stretched thin, as you said, ammunitions are running low, I just don't see how Russia does not benefit from this, where things stand today.
When you say benefit, Russia benefits by bringing this war to an end and getting its economy back on track, not a war economy.
War or Ukraine? Ukraine or Iran war, or both?
Any war. Mario, you're talking to a guy who's visited Russia extensively, and I've spoken with Russians at the highest possible levels, except the president. Of course, I haven't done that. The one thing that Russia says, and again, people have to start listening to the Russians instead of listening to the idiots in the United States. Russia wants stability. The key to Russia's ability to interface with the world is predictability. The antithesis of predictability is chaos. What you're talking about is Russia benefiting from chaos. Russia does not benefit from chaos. Russia is not a generator of chaos. Russia is about stability, predictability. What Russia's looking for in Europe isn't to dominate Europe, but to have well-defined spheres of influence and control that interface in a manner that it allows for reduction of tension. This is why they put draft treaties on the table in December of 2021 to the United States and NATO. Russia's not looking to occupy anything, invade anything. They didn't start the Ukraine conflict. Just remember that. The CIA started the Ukraine conflict and for the purpose of creating this chaos. It's the United States that is the generator of chaos. We benefit from chaos. Russia does not. So anybody who thinks that Russia's encouraging all this to happen so that there's chaos and they benefit, you don't understand Russia and how Russia works. Russia does not want this war in the Middle East. Russia would prefer that there is no war, and Russia will work overtime to prevent this war, to reduce it, to end it. Russia didn't start the Ukraine conflict, but it will end in a way, listen to what I said, that ensures there won't be another war in 5 years. Russia Ukraine in a manner that is conducive to that. You can't have Western Ukrainian nationalists governing, supported by Europe and the United States, believing that they're just going to resume this war at any time. You know that's what Zelensky's been saying. You know that's what Budano's been saying. You know that what Zelensky's saying. They're not looking for an end to this war. They're looking for a temporary ceasefire until which time they can reconstitute capability to begin the fight over again. Russia's not going to allow that to happen. So Russia's not a generator of chaos. Russia is a seeker of stability. And so that's what Russia's goal will be here in the Middle East, not to create a conflict that weakens the United States, but to bring an end to a conflict that generates chaos and anarchy geopolitically.
Russia does benefit from increased oil prices, and prices will increase if the Strait of Hormuz closes. And the Strait of Hormuz will close if the war drags on. And if Iran sees that as a strategy of last resort.
Russia does not, Mario, again, I'm just telling you, you got to listen to me. Trust me on this one. Russia does not carry out foreign policy designed to influence the price of oil. Russia wants stability in the oil market just like anybody does. Only idiots who play the market want the thing to go up because then they hedge, they do this now. Ask any West Texas oil man. What do you need more than anything else? Stable oil prices. Why? Because predictability. You're investing, you're putting holes in the ground that are costing you money. Everybody go watch Landman. You can get a real quick education on the politics of oil and how instability is devastating for the people who actually do it. So no, Russia's not sitting here playing a stupid game to influence oil prices. Russia doesn't do that. First of all, Russia sells half its oil at steep discount because of sanctions. So, the higher the prices go, it just means that Russia gives a greater discount to increase their market viability. But what Russia wants more than anything is for stability so that Russian oil can be sold on the global market at a price that is the equal of all the other prices. Russia is not looking to play this game. This is a Western fantasy. Anybody who speaks about Russia and oil in that way, they don't know anything about Russia or oil.
So then, how long do you think this war will last, considering everything you've said so far? I think I'm surprised by your stance on Russia, whether they would benefit or not. I understand China does not want to see this war. Iran doesn't want to see this war. And the US and Israel are seeking regime change. How long do you think this operation will last?
I think what we're going to see is the exhaustion of American military power rapidly, measured in weeks. And that creates a window of political opportunity for Russia and China to work diplomacy behind the scenes and seek an end to this conflict before it becomes the existential burn the house down. They don't want Saudi Arabian oil field struck, Azeri oil field struck, Iranian oil field struck. They want to keep the energy component out of it because both Iran and Russia benefit from energy stability.
Well, They went all out. Iran just said the U.S. Air base at Al-Dahra, Dhafra, sorry, in the Emirates has been struck by Iranian ballistic missiles. Just came in now. I'm in the UAE, so this is in the UAE where I am now. So they've immediately. I expected it to go through, as I said, escalation ladder, strike Israel before striking U.S. bases, but they've gone after U.S. bases from the get-go.
Yeah, they said they would.
Does it surprise you that they went after the bases in UAE and Qatar from the get-go?
No, what surprises me is we're not seeing buildings blow up behind you.
Do you think they could target the city centers of Gulf nations?
Did you take a look at the city center of Tehran?
But you're saying Iran could target, Gulf nations were trying to convince. So what you're saying is they will target the city centers in order to pressure Gulf nations, to pressure the U.S. to end the war.
What I'm saying is that Iran, this is a war of existential proportions.
But targeting the city centers of the Gulf nations is
what? Because their city center was just targeted, Mario. Is what? Targeting the cities, the city centers of nations is what? Downtown Tehran just got blown up. Do you think they really give a rat's ass about what the people of Dubai and Abu Dhabi think? If they thought for a moment that by striking these centers, it puts pressure on, you want to see how fragile these Gulf Arab countries are? Up their city center. This is a war that shouldn't have happened. And, you can say the United Arab Emirates, articulated this, that, and the other thing. No, I'm telling you right now, and you know this, that in the behind the scenes discussions they had with Trump and Israel, they said, if you're going to pull the trigger, end it, win, kill them, kill them, kill them. And the Iranians know this. So you think there's any love lost here? You think the Iranians are saying, oh, those Emiratis are our good friends. They really mean us no harm. No, they heard them articulate death to Iran to the United States behind the scenes. So I'm surprised you haven't seen buildings blow up behind you, but who knows where this goes. We're talking about the opening hours of a war, and we already see Iran following through on its promise. Now, Russia and China, I can guarantee you, are making phone call after phone call after phone call, or saying don't as to the energy level. Because I believe the Russian strategy is to let the United States exhaust itself. There's a finite amount of military power that we have, and we're going to blow it all, and then we're going to be sitting there with nothing, and Israel's going to be getting pounded. What you just saw today is just the beginning. Again, you don't have to have 40 missiles come in and have the light show. You just got to start taking out critically important structure.
Scott, this is a regional war. If they start striking city centers of other Gulf nations, okay, that's something I haven't even thought of. What happens next? Because then
it's a war of existential survival. What do you mean? What happens next?
Trump's allies are being struck. His aircraft carriers are at risk. That's very different to the 12-day war.
This is not the 12-day war. This is a war of existential survival. Why do people not understand that?
Kuwait being targeted as we speak as well.
Good. They should all be targeted. They all didn't do enough to stop this war. They all whispered behind the back of Iran. They all wished for this war to take place because they want the regime in Tehran removed. You know this. You know this to be a fact. I know this to be a fact.
Abu Dhabi.
Pardon?
Explosions in Abu Dhabi, but I need more information. Is that at a US base or where exactly? There is no way, just to be clear, there is the likelihood of striking city centers of these Gulf nations. I'm not asking for personal reasons. I don't want to evacuate live on stream, but the likelihood of striking, because for me, I thought that would be, there's going to be a few days before they target city centers of Gulf nations. Is there a possibility, even though it's unlikely, is there a possibility this might happen from the get-go by Iran? Because it is existential for them. And when they're targeting the supreme leader, the president, remember in the Ukraine war when we'd have a discussion and a lot of people would say Putin will not use nuclear weapons unless his life's at risk or there's attacks on the Russian mainland at scale or someone's invading Russia. It's the same here. If Iran, everyone thought the likelihood of striking the city centers of neighbors, they wouldn't do it. They need to target Israel, maybe U.S. bases. But if this does become existential for them, you're saying is a possibility even from the get-go that these city centers get targeted as a way to pressure the U.S. and end it early?
I'm a military guy. And I imagine military people think the same throughout. Ask yourself why Putin hasn't killed Zelensky. Because Zelensky could have been killed on day one. It's because they don't want to get into a situation where national leaders are part of the target deck. Because once you start targeting national leaders, you eliminate diplomatic possibilities, negotiating possibilities. Israel and the United States started.
That's in Bahrain.
Yeah,
That's not Israel or Iran. That's Bahrain.
Good. Bahrain could have stopped this war, but they didn't. They're home of the Fifth Fleet. I mean, what do they want? This war started by the United States and Israel trying to kill the supreme leader. Do people understand who the supreme leader is? In the West, we revile him. Oh, he's Ali Khamenei. He's this, that. He's the most important religious figure in Iran and the second most important religious figure in the entire Islamic Shia world. And we tried to kill him this morning. Does that not resonate in the thick skulls of people? What just happened? We tried to kill the Iranian president. Do you think for a second now Iran suddenly holds the lives of the sheiks of the United Arab Emirates sacrosanct? We can't touch them. They're the leaders of nations. They just tried to kill the Iranian leadership. What do you expect Iran to do? The nations, and Iran has said this, the nations that facilitate the strike against Iran will pay a price. So I'm not here to tell you how the Iranians are going to target and who they're going to target. I'm here to tell you that all bets are off. This is a war of existential survival.
What's Trump's off-ramp? If they do target city centers of these Gulf nations and the U.S. is in a tricky position, if the decapitation strike or the regime change operation early on to get people on the streets does not work, could Trump get out of this, or he's stuck now till the end?
Well, the end will be when we run out of ammunition. The off-ramp is to save American lives, because there comes a point, again, in a boxing match, you can go in there and as long as you got your hands up, you're viable. But when your arms get tired, they've been hitting in the side, your arms are tired and your hands start to drop, you're going to get knocked out. And so Russia and China are going to be sitting there watching the American hands get right about here, and they're going to tell Trump, end it. We'll find a way to get this thing over, but you got to back out now. You got to end. And it's not going to end in an American victory. It'll end in an American defeat, but it won't be a defeat measured by American caskets.
One of my team members just now told me he heard an explosion in the UAE in Abu Dhabi. Just came in now, one of our news team members who's based in Abu Dhabi.
Well,
so it's confirmed.
Welcome to
বিকাশ পেমেন্টে 10,000 টাকার বেশি অফার শপিং চলছে তো
naive thought that it could have been limited on the Israeli and US side as well, limited strike during negotiations. But we're in full-blown war and Gulf nations are being targeted as well.
Yeah, because they're parties to the conflict. I mean, why don't people understand it? The Gulf Arab states have gotten away for far too long to sit there and play the duplicitous game.
Reports of Iranian missiles targeting the USS Lincoln aircraft carrier already. Everything's being targeted. There is no escalation ladder whatsoever. Everything's being targeted.
Welcome to war.
Can you explain to us the USS Lincoln's defense capabilities and the Armada's defense capabilities?
It'll be a layered defense capability. I mean, the Aegis missile defense shield is linked into a satellite architecture up there, and so we have satellites that look for evidence of missile launch. And I'm not going to get into the details, IR or other signals. And then once you get evidence of a launch and direction, then you have layers of defense that are out there searching for them. And as the threats come in, you're not going to get to the Lincoln right off the bat. You're going to have to go through layers of defense, to include F-35 fighters. F-35 radar is designed to actually integrate in with the Aegis radar system. And so, there is a shield up there that is designed to protect. Now, if the Iranians can fire something that avoids detection at launch, and then can have performance characteristics that are not within the parameter norms of Aegis, in theory, they can penetrate this air defense and strike the Abraham Lincoln. We'll see what happens. I don't know the technical capabilities of the Iranian systems. I would personally believe that the Abraham Lincoln won't be struck unless you can overwhelm the screen. The United States Navy has been preparing for this kind of fight for a long time. The Aegis system was designed to actually defend against mass Soviet cruise missile, air-launched cruise missile attacks. And so, it's been upgraded and tinkered with and all that. So we'll see. I mean, again, I just wish it had never gotten to this. The last thing I want to see is an American aircraft carrier hit.
Can't believe we're even talking about it. I knew we expected war, but I didn't expect it to escalate this quickly.
But the Iranians said so. I mean, they said it.
The Iranians say, but they do say a lot of things, and they don't always deliver on them. I think all sides say a lot of things, so you just don't know what's a bluff, a negotiating bluff to deter the US from striking Iran, versus what they actually mean. And it seems what they're saying right now, they mean. They're responding very differently to the 12-day war. Remember, in the 12-day war, we expected a barrage of missiles against Israel. That's what we saw, and a calculated, pre-planned attack at the US base in Qatar. After informing the US, so more of a symbolic strike. What we're seeing right now is just strikes all across the board, and the Houthis joining. The only thing left that hasn't joined is Hezbollah. I think that's the last. But
remember, Hezbollah got the crap pounded out of it this morning, so Hezbollah's going to have to recover from that, readjust. But again, as Israeli resources, remember, war is about resources. As a significant number of Israeli resources were used to suppress Hezbollah. Those resources now are going to be diverted elsewhere. And if Hezbollah is able to recover, which I believe they will, you're going to see a Hezbollah strike.
Explosions are heard in Jordan. Is there any good air defense systems in those Gulf nations whatsoever? Because they just seems like sitting ducks. It just seems like that's what I mean. Not only US bases, just the city centers. It just seems like, I'm not a military strategist, but if I was Iran, and this is existential for me, striking the city centers of those Gulf nations, which I hope does not happen. But if it does happen, if I was Iran and I'm being struck, the leadership is being killed, Tehran is being struck, why wouldn't they? That's the easiest way to pressure Trump.
Well, it's also the easiest way to pressure the king of Jordan. It's also the easiest way to pressure the sheiks that rule the United Arab Emirates. It's also the easiest way to pressure the king of Saudi Arabia. I mean, these are things that they haven't. The indignation that Saudi Arabia had when Iraq fired Scud missiles that struck downtown Riyadh. I remember that. I was there. How dare they? How dare they? Well, guess what, guys? You just sat back and encouraged the United States and Israel to carry out a decapitation strike against the Iranian government that included trying to kill the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, the number 2 Islamic Shia official in the world, and you expect nothing to happen?
They haven't attacked Saudi yet. So all the reports right now are Bahrain, the UAE, Jordan. Is that because of the Saudis' military capabilities? Or is it because they don't want Saudi to join the war because Saudi has a lot more military capabilities than the other
Saudi has no military capability. What do you mean Saudi has more? What are they going to do? Throw in a couple F-15s? The United States and Israel have already flooded the market. And you say Saudi comes into the war. Do you understand what that means? That means that we have to open up our war plan and we have to carve out a sector to give it to a Saudi military that's not up to the task. So we're supposed to come into Iran and suppress using tactics and everything. And now we're going to open it up and say, here, Saudi Arabia, you jump in this war with your totally crap Air Force. And you're going to come in and do what? Screw it up? Saudi Arabia's got nothing to bring to the table. The Iranians are not afraid of the Saudis at all. Iran's
Well,
going up.
Saudi, a lot of people are saying as well, Saudi, even though it's a rival to Iran, they don't want to see Iran fall because Iran, while it was a historic rival, it's now being seen more as a deterrent against Israeli expansion. So a lot of these Gulf countries don't want to see the fall of the regime.
Also remember that the bulk of the Saudi oil fields are in eastern Saudi Arabia, where there's a significant Shia population. You start again. you try to kill the number 2 Shia figure in the world, and this could go south really bad for Saudi Arabia. People talk about the people rising up in Iran. Wait till the Shia in eastern Saudi Arabia rise up. Bahrain, majority Shia population. What happens when they go to the streets? And now in the past, it was like, well, Iran only supported superficially. What if Iran turns the table and launches a decapitation strike against Bahrain, and then a suppression strike? And now the majority Shia population rises up and beheads all of the Sunni bastards who have been ruling them and says, we are now part of the Islamic. I mean, this thing could go bad all over. This is why this war should never have been fought. It's a stupid war.
You're defining a regional war. We've always talked about this being a regional war. Well, a few proxies being active is not really a regional war. What we're discussing right now, if Iran strikes the city centers, a blast is heard in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi.
What did I tell you? If this isn't going to be your grandfather's war. All right,
according to one source. We're getting more information as we speak, but you said it's a matter of time, or minutes later. We're getting reports of a hit in Riyadh. We don't know what they're striking though. That's what we don't know yet. What those targets are. I think this.
Well, I would imagine that
it'll be U.S. bases at the get-go. I don't expect them to strike.
I mean, there's U.S. military facilities in all of these places that you've discussed. So that would be the lead. I don't think the lead thing is to take out, Saudi government facilities. I think the lead thing is to take out U.S. military installations. Right next to Riyadh is a big air base that we use to fly AWACS out of and refueler aircraft out of. So they may be targeting that. In Jordan, the biggest air base right now that we're using outside of Israel is a Jordanian air base. And when we say strikes in Jordan, I would imagine that air base is being hit as well. But again, if you don't try to kill the supreme leader and not believe that there's going to be consequences for that action.
Wow. Talking about a regional war, Scott, what is Turkey's role in all this?
Again, Turkey, Erdogan is a strategic player, and he needs stability. Again, only amateurs sit back and talk about chaos. Real leaders want stability. And Erdogan is a neighbor of Iran. Erdogan and Turkey and Iran have significant economic interaction. All the people are sitting there going, PJAC, we can't wait for the Kurds to rise up. You know who doesn't want the Kurds to rise up in Iran? Turkey, because they have their own Kurdish problem. So, Turkey's not dying for this to happen.
Will they sit idle though? Is there a stage where enough is enough? So we've got what started from October 7th is the war in Gaza. Then that expanded to Lebanon. That expanded to Yemen. You got Syria struck, the decapitation of the Syrian military after Assad's fall. And now we're seeing, obviously, Qatar was struck with the Hamas delegation. And now we're seeing a full-blown war with Iran, which I remember our early discussions. I'm like, even before the 12-day war, and we all said that this is the red line that hopefully we will never cross. Before that, the red line was Hezbollah. We'll cross all lines. Is there a stage where Arab nations will come together and say, this cannot continue? This is becoming a threat to all of us, not Iran, but Israel's aggression against all those countries? Or is their mindset somewhere completely different? Or do they stand with Israel and they want to see the fall of the Iranian regime? And I'm unfairly putting all Arab countries together because I know the Gulf nations and Turkey, they all have different interests, even within Qatar, Saudi, UAE, they all have different interests when it comes to Iran and regional powers and Israel.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. I think that the major Gulf Arab countries have made a strategic decision that the path forward that is best for them, stability-wise, because again, stability is the key, especially if you're an oil-producing country. These guys don't want chaos. They want stability. Nobody's going to invest in a country at war. You invest in, especially in the oil business, you're looking, 20, 30, 40 years downstream. You want those years to be years of stability, not chaos, not war. So I think that they've made a strategic decision that as long as the United States is not willing to make peace with Iran, the only solution that brings long-term stability is regime change in Iran. So I think they're gambling on the Abrams Accords, on the bringing down the Iranian regime, and that will create the opportunity for Israel and the Gulf Arab states to enter into this grand economic union and all this stuff. So I think they've made that bet. Turkey, you brought up Turkey. Maybe it's time to introduce the concept of the Zangezur corridor to people. Scott, what are you talking about? Well, it's the corridor that connects Nakhchivan with the mainstream Azerbaijan territory. There's an Armenian-controlled territory there that borders the Iranian border. What Turkey has been talking about, and J.D. Vance was just there. Again, you asked Turkey. J.D. Vance was just in the region, meeting with Armenia and Azerbaijan to talk about the Zangezur corridor. Why would he do that? J.D. Vance knows we were going to attack Iran. J.D. Vance knows that. So he's out doing diplomacy to do what? To create the conditions conducive for the sustainment of this corridor. Iran is against this corridor. This corridor is disruptive to the north-south connectivity that Russia and Iran are looking for, the St. Petersburg to Chabahar rail line, et cetera. It's also disruptive to China's, new Silk Road. Remember, there's a rail line that just opened up from Western China into Tehran. And so Turkey has been looking for, this opportunity to create its own presence in the region. The Zangezur corridor allows Turkey to emerge out of Turkey with a land corridor that connects it with Azerbaijan and then flows on into Central Asia. So that's the Turkish grand scheme of things. So now you have to say, is this big war with Iran conducive to that, or does it interfere with that? Turkey's also a country that desires to be a regional energy hub, especially in gas. And a lot of that, of course, is dependent upon Turk Stream and Turkmen oil or gas flowing in through, Russia and former Soviet territories into Turkey and then on into Europe. But Turkey has also gambled on the big oil fields or gas fields off of Israel, able to capture that gas and have it go through Turkey as well. So Turkey's not looking for a decisive break in relations with Israel. Erdogan is playing a very, very delicate game right now. So I think what Turkey's going to do is sit back and monitor the situation and reinforce actions that are the beneficial. But again, I just come down to the basic fundamentals here. Turkey's not looking to sow chaos and anarchy into this region. Turkey's looking to inject stability. And this war does not promote stability. It's the antithesis of that. So I think Turkey will be looking for the end of this, a way to end this conflict sooner rather than later. And I think you'll be seeing Turkey working in concert with Russia and China to bring an end to this conflict.
By the way, we're seeing smoke come out of rising from the Al Dhafra air base in the UAE. I'm not sure if we know, if the producer can check, is the US using those bases in the UAE and Qatar and Saudi? Because as far as I understand, F-22s were sent to Israel and they're using the jets from Israel and from the aircraft carriers because those countries did not allow their bases to be used in this.
But you don't have to. The thing is, they were used by the United States. And as we speak, there's certain communications capabilities and intelligence collection capabilities that are still intact. It's still part of the system. So even though you took away an airplane, you haven't eliminated the fact that it's a U.S. military presence on the soil of United Arab Emirates.
One more question on Turkey. We've seen tensions with Israel. I know it's a very delicate position that it's in. If we look at what's happening right now and the escalation to the other Gulf nations, striking U.S. bases in those nations, just to be clear, as far as we know so far, new launches have been detected. So obviously this is going to continue going on. What would you say is the worst case and the best case scenario here? The best case is this ends relatively soon with some sort of deal. This all was not regime change, even though they're talking about regime change. And the whole goal was to pressure Iran to reach some sort of deal that is beneficial, that Trump can call it a win, and he can still call himself the peace president, which that ship has almost sailed, versus the worst case scenario. How much could this escalate? Could it drag other countries? To what extent? Because I think we're at a position now where talking about worst case scenarios seems to be the more logical way of looking at things based on the last few years. And this footage is Bahrain, by the way. We're playing right now. This is insane. These are Gulf nations we're looking at right now. You're asking whether this is a regional war. Not sure what the target is here. So if the team can send me through what the target is, whether this is a U.S. military facility.
I think that's
but this is Bahrain.
Yeah, I think that's the Muharraq base in Bahrain. I spent a lot of time in Bahrain when I was a weapons inspector. I think the key to this is Iran, because Iran, as it appears, has hit the on switch. And so they are in full-blown war mode of an existential nature. And therefore, they don't care about what the United States thinks or what Israel thinks. They're in the business of bringing about the most damage possible, the most harm possible. They're here to hurt America, hurt Israel. And then, we can take a guidance from Vladimir Putin. He is not going to allow the Ukraine conflict to end in a way unless the root causes of that conflict are resolved, because he doesn't want the war to begin in 5 years or 10 years. When this conflict ends in Ukraine, from the Russian perspective, it's over, finished, done. So now from the Iranian perspective, they just tried to kill your supreme leader and your president. Do you want to end this conflict in a way that enables them to be in a position to do that again and again? That's what happened with the 12-day war. It ended, but it didn't solve any of the problems. Israel and the United States were still there sitting, saying, we want to hit you. So I think this has to end from the Iranian perspective, either with their defeat or a new reality in the region that defangs Israel and has the United States recognizing that it just can't come in and flex its military muscle like it thought it could. That's going to be a hard pill for the United States. I personally believe that Donald Trump has committed political suicide, that it's over for him. Yeah. His presidency is over.
Makes no, why? That's what I was going to ask you. Like, why did he do this? It just doesn't make any sense for U.S. interests, political and strategic.
Well, there must be an element of desperation there that, a lot, again, I try to stay out of domestic American politics just because it's become so divisive. So you don't know what's hyperbole and what's reality. But, there's no mainstream economist that thinks that what Trump is doing is helping the American economy. In fact, they think it's leading us to an absolute economic collapse and downfall. And at some point in time, you can have Scott Bessent out there posturing about this, that, and the other thing. But unless it's backed with reality, the reality is the economy is heading in the wrong direction. Hyperinflation, et cetera. The same thing with the military. You can have Pete Hegseth sit there and bench press 315 pounds, but do we have military capacity? Or is it all bluff and bluster? And I think what happened is Trump realized that he had boxed himself into a corner here with his rhetoric. There was no reality to back him up, and he was in desperate need of a Hail Mary play, that if he could remove the regime quickly and do what no president has been able to do for 47 years, that this victory would be enough to push him through the midterms and emerge victorious and able to continue his presidency. What we're seeing now is that this president is going to lose the midterms and that the Democrats are going to be empowered to come at him constitutionally on a whole host of issues. Impeachment will be basically a daily operation in D.C. And if he loses the Senate, and this war could cause him to lose decisively, he not only can be impeached, he can be convicted. J.D. Vance has to be just sitting there getting drunk because he will never be president of the United States. MAGA is finished. MAGA was premised on the notion that we don't do these wars. And yet here we are, knee deep in a war that we're not going to win. So this president committed political. Benjamin Netanyahu now, he warned the United States, if we pull this trigger, we have to win this. We have to get rid of the Iranian regime. This could be the end of Benjamin Netanyahu, because if facilities keep blowing up in Tel Aviv, and there's no way to stop this, they can't stop it, and it keeps happening beyond 12 days into 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. That's the end of Benjamin Netanyahu.
That's Abu Dhabi interceptions we're seeing right now. Again, for people listening, this is not Israel. This is not Iran. This is Abu Dhabi. We saw Qatar just earlier as well. And we saw Bahrain footage as well. What happens next in Iran? We talked about the protests. The odds of Khamenei being out as supreme leader were 20% before the war started, just below 20%. We're 18% by end of March, end of next month. We're at 18% on Polymarket, people putting their money on this instead of just guessing, and now it's up to 45% chance, 50-50 that Khamenei will be out by end of next month, whether he's dead or he's deposed. Where do you stand on this, and what do you expect to see on the protests? Because I know you said that most people support the Iranian regime. Obviously, a lot of people dispute that, but we also have to agree that protests were the worst they've ever been since the Iranian regime, since the revolution in 1979.
Well, that's not true. In 2009. The Green Revolution put people in the streets. There have been massive protests before. You say the worst they ever been. That's because the Mossad deliberately triggered acts of violence, and then those acts of violence and the response.
This is Qatar. Look at the strike. Where do you know what that is? That's the base.
I don't know. That doesn't look like the base.
No, it doesn't. That looks like. I don't know Qatar really well, but that doesn't look like the base either. It's very close to the city.
Get used to it, because all these Arab nations stood by passively while Israel and the United States blew the crap out of downtown Tehran. And that just is a game changer. So, too bad. So sad, too bad. Shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have allowed it to happen. But, I don't know where we were on
the protest and the fall of Khamenei.
Oh, yeah. Protest. Again, the rules have changed, Mario. See, the December protests were about democracy. The Iranian president said he was with the protesters when they first came out. He said, we have to do a better job with the economy. We have to do better. But then it was hijacked by the Mossad, hijacked by the monarchists, and it became ultra violent on purpose so that liars in the West could talk about 40,000 dead when there was only 3,000 dead. 3,000 is a lot. But the 3,000 dead because the Mossad made a decision to trigger violence to get a reaction from the regime. The game has changed, just like they're striking Gulf Arab states. There will be no mass demonstrations in Iran. Now, because the game has changed. Right now, if you go out and protest, you are self-identifying as a monarchist. You're self-identifying as a Mossad agent, and you will be destroyed. The game has changed. So anybody who thought that the Iranian government is going to sit there and let universities, take over the streets, that's just not going to happen.
But a lot of protesters were saying we need Trump to interfere. The reason that protests were escalating is because they expected the U.S. to strike Iran. As soon as Trump walked back his comments about striking Iran, the protests died down. I think if the regime, if the IRGC is targeted, if the domestic enforcement group, I don't know what they're called, but they're part of the IRGC group, if those guys are targeted, their bases are targeted, then it will be more difficult to be able to first censor. If the ability to censor the internet is also destroyed, it'll be more difficult for the Iranian authorities to censor the internet, to stop to help the internet, but also to crack down on protesters. And we might also start seeing defections within the military. Because now the military is looking weaker.
They're going to rally around the government. They're going to rally around the nation. Iran is under attack by Israel. Do you not understand that? Iran is under attack by Israel, the most hated nation in the world, that has committed genocide against the Palestinian people. Iran is the only nation that is constitutionally obligated to support a free and independent Palestinian state. This is part of the Iranian DNA. And Israel, the butchers of Gaza, are attacking Iran, and you expect the Iranian people to say, oh, ye supporters of Israel.
রান্না করতে লাগবে শুধু রাঁধুনি রেডিমিক্স মুরগির মাংসের মশলা।
যখন রোদে তা
So it's over.
But the people, we saw videos of the protesters
no
saying
people.
death to
Quit talking
Khamenei.
about the people.
Before
What
in
people?
January, we had people say death to the Khamenei, which didn't happen as often or barely happened in previous protests.
And then the next
people
day,
want the regime to fall.
A crowd 5 times as big went out in the street and said, "Long live Khamenei." Why didn't you sit there and go, "Oh, that's the real voice of the Iranian people"?
There's two voices, and if the
there's only one voice.
targeted,
there's a whisper and there's a voice.
If there is two voices, I don't have the exact numbers, but if there's two voices, what happens then? If the besieged is targeted, that focus on domestic security, if those guys are targeted, the internet isn't halted by the authorities, and you've got the voices that are, death to Israel, in support of the supreme leader, and the others that want death to the supreme leader. Isn't that a formula for civil war? Because there doesn't seem to be a plan for someone to take over or taking over from the supreme leader. As you said earlier, Reza Pahlavi does not have enough domestic support. There's no other opposition leader. The Iranian regime has done a great job over many, many decades to systematically ensure that they are ingrained in all aspects of the economy, and there is no alternative. So for me, that looks like
Mario. There is no viable opposition to the Iranian regime inside Iran. There are Mossad cells that have been very effective of playing the propaganda game to create incidents inside Iran that are then filmed and broadcast out to a massive network of echo chambers, including you. I'm just being honest. You played this crap over and over and over again, and you breathe life into these lies of 10,000, 20,000, 30. That never happened. The reality is so far different. You should have brought on Morandi and talked to him. He would have given you the truth.
I've interviewed Morandi many times. Now, to be clear as well, Morandi is very pro-regime. While the entire country doesn't have internet, he magically has internet to become the regime mouthpiece. But I'd like to have him on, and I've had him on multiple times on the show. And that's why
but he's not a regime mouthpiece. Professor Morandi
had internet while no one else did in Iran. He was the only
personal friend of mine. Is a close personal friend of mine, which means I know his heart and I know his mind. And I know his motivation. Yes, he is a defender of the Islamic Republic. Let there be no doubt about that. But he is not a liar. And he is not a man who, puts out disinformation. You have not been able to contradict a single fact that Morandi has put on the table. No one can, because he is a fact-based analyst. You just don't want to hear what he has to say about the support that the regime has amongst the Iranian people, because it's counter to the narrative that's being pushed by the anti-regime people in the West.
I think the anti-regime people say there's no one to support the regime. Everyone hates the regime. I think that's false. There's a significant, I don't know what percentage it is, amount of people that love the regime in Iran. We saw these protests in support of the regime, but also we saw massive protests that can't all be Mossad. Mossad can't have tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people in Iran. Significant amount of people that are also against the regime. And my worry, now my position is clear. I hate the regime. I don't like the regime. I'm very clear on that and the way they treated their people. I'm also very, very, very against a regime change, because I think, and my question to you is that there are these two groups. How big each one is up for debate. If there is no alternative for the regime, and if Trump is committed to a regime change operation, he'll continue this till the end, so he can consider this a win. My worry is then what? If there is no opposition party that can take power, the prince who I've had on the show, or the Reza Pahlavi who I've had on the show, doesn't have enough support to come in, then it just seems like the goal is not regime change. The goal, my worry is that the goal is what Israel wants, Iran to end up like Syria. No regime, no leadership.
But Iran won't end up like Syria. Again, you talk about, understand this again. Don't conflate the people that went into the streets on December 28th with anti-regime opposition. The people that went in on the streets on December 28th, 29th, 30th were Iranian civilians saying, hey, we're merchantmen. We run the markets. And the rial just collapsed. And we are now in a crisis here. We're losing our businesses. We need the government to do a better job. Notice what I just said. We need the government to do a better job. They didn't say death to the government, down with the government, up with the Shah. They said we need the government because we are the people of Iran. So we are protesting, and they were peaceful protests. And the Iranian president came out and said, I am with you. I am with you. We have to do a better job. So all those people that came out, none of them are against the regime. It was only when Mossad came out on December 30th and activated their violent cells. And the Iranians will tell you, if you will listen to them, how these violent groups came in and seized control, deliberately attacked demonstrators and security forces, and created this message of violence. And then you have a handful of people come out and say, death to Khamenei, up with the Shah. It's filmed and videotaped, sent out on and then echoed. It's not what the Iranian people believe.
I've just been informed, by the way, that Dubai, where I am right now, has just been hit. They're going to show a video. Don't know what the target is. They're going to show the video now, but Dubai has been hit as well. There is a US base. Oh, Abu Dhabi. Okay, that's different. Not Dubai. That's very different because Abu Dhabi is where the US base is located. Dubai is very different. That's why I was a bit worried. So Dubai has not been hit. Wrong information that was sent here is Abu Dhabi. You can show the footage. Going back to the protests, I got a bit worried when they said Dubai. I didn't expect that. Again, that would not be a US base. But going back to what you just said right now, my point though is that yes, Mossad is active. Israel said, Mossad said they're active. I think no one disputes that. But I also think that if there's no domestic support for protests or opposition to the government, the Mossad would not be able to succeed in getting people on the streets. So I think it's a mix of both. Mossad trying to support the protesters, trying to weaken the besieged, but there is people that don't want the regime to be there. But going back to the crux of the question, though, Scott, if Israel and Trump want regime change, and you're saying the regime will not fall, then what should we expect to happen? There's two opposing views. How is this going to end?
The United States will run out of military power. The generals have already warned the president. We have a finite amount of ammunition. Run out of ammunition, it doesn't matter how many airplanes we have, how many aircraft carriers we have. If we can't drop bombs, it's useless, and then we're done. So what happens is, then the United States has to withdraw from this fight. And then Israel is left on its own. And then we get into regime change in Israel. And,
আচ্ছা, আমি আসতেছি কিছুক্ষণ পরে আবারও। এখন ইফতারির সময়, তো ইফতারির পরে আবার হোপফুলি নতুন কোনো আপডেট নিয়ে আসলে লাইভ করতে আসবো যদি করা হয়। আচ্ছা, আসসালামু আলাইকুম।